There is a quiet moment that happens every year. It comes just after midnight. When the noise fades, the messages stop, and the room finally goes still for a brief second. Before the year has really begun, people feel it, that familiar pull. This year will be different this year. I will do better. We call them New Year's resolutions. They feel modern, personal, almost private. But the truth is, this moment, this urge to promise ourselves change, is far older than we think, older than America, older than Christianity, older than the calendar we use today. New Year's resolutions didn't begin as self-help goals. They began as survival rituals, and for more than 2,000 years, they have followed the same pattern: hope, promise, pressure, and failure. To understand why resolutions still feel so heavy, we have to go back far before gym memberships, productivity planners, or New Year. New You, we have to go back to ancient time, more than 4,000 years ago. In ancient Babylon, the New Year didn't begin in January. It began in spring, when crops returned, rivers rose, and survival for the next year was uncertain. The Babylonians celebrated a massive festival called Akichu. Lasting more than 10 days. During this time, the entire society paused. Kings humbled themselves, debts were addressed. Order was symbolically restored, and people made promises not to themselves, but to their gods. They vowed to repay debts. They promised loyalty. They swore they would correct past wrongs. These promises weren't about self-improvement. They were about avoiding disaster. The belief was simple: if you entered the new year with unresolved guilt, the gods would notice. Failing to keep these vows wasn't just disappointing. It was dangerous from the very beginning. The new year wasn't about celebration first, it was about moral accounting. Centuries later, the Romans inherited this idea and reshaped it in ancient Rome. January was named after Janus, the two-faced god who looked both backward and forward. Janus guarded doorways, thresholds, and transitions, and the new year belonged to him. At the start of each year, Romans made offerings and promises not only to gods, but to the state. Loyalty, honesty, civic duty. It was a public act. Your behavior in the previous year was weighed. Your intentions for the next were declared once again. The new year wasn't about becoming happier, it was about becoming acceptable to society, to authority, to fate. This is where resolutions began to change. They were no longer just about survival, they became about identity: who you were, who you claimed you would be, and whether you lived up to it. When Christianity spread across Europe, it absorbed these traditions, but gave them a new weight. By the Middle Ages, the new year became a time of moral reflection, not self-esteem, not goals. And people weren't resolving to improve their lives, they were resolving to repent. Churches encouraged confession. Sermons focused on regret, discipline, and restraint. The year ahead was framed as a test, when you were expected to fail less than last time. This idea crossed the Atlantic with the earliest American settlers, and it took deep rooting. Early Puritan America, the new year was not a party, it was quiet, severe, introspective. Journals from the 1600s and 1700s show men and women writing long lists of moral failures at the end of each year: pride, laziness, wasted time, impure thoughts. Then came the resolutions: not exercise more, not be happier, but vows like, I will not speak idly, I will rise earlier, I will devote myself fully to God's will. These weren't suggestions, they were obligations. And failure wasn't just personal disappointment, it was evidence of spiritual weakness. By the time America became a nation, the new year was already loaded with pressure. Everything changed in the 20th century as religion loosened its grip and psychology rose. Resolutions quietly transformed again. The guilt didn't disappear, it just changed language. As self-help replaced sermons, discipline replaced salvation, productivity replaced virtue. By the 1950s and 1960s, New Year's resolutions were fully personal, but still deeply moral. Magazines encouraged readers to fix themselves, improve habits, lose weight, be better spouses, better workers, better citizens. The message was subtle but clear: if you failed, it was because you lacked willpower. And for the first time in history, resolutions became individual burdens, not shared rituals. You carried them alone. This is where the modern discomfort begins, because our brains are still wired for ancient rituals, collective moments, shared meaning, external forgiveness. But modern resolutions offer none of that. There is no ceremony, no absolution, no reset. only tracking we promise change without support. We expect transformation without grace, and when we fail, which most people do by February, the guilt feels strangely familiar. That's because it's the same guilt carried by ancient farmers, Roman citizens, medieval believers, and Puritan settlers, just without the gods to blame today. Resolutions feel heavier than ever, not because we're weaker, but because the ritual was stripped of its original purpose. It was never meant to optimize us. It was meant to mark time, to acknowledge endings, to release the past, to step forward. Imperfect, but together instead. We turned it into a performance end. The calendar keeps asking the same question every year: who will you fail to become this time? That quiet moment after midnight still comes, the room still goes, still the thought still appears, but now, instead of hope, many people feel exhaustion. Maybe that's why so many quietly stop making resolutions without realizing they're stepping away from a tradition older than civilization itself, because resolutions were never about fixing ourselves. They were about admitting we're human, and for thousands of years, that was enough. If you've ever made a New Year's resolution and felt it fade before winter ended, you're not alone, and you never were. You were participating in something ancient, something imperfect by design. So here's a question worth sitting with: did resolutions fail us, or did we ask them to become something they were never meant to be? If this history surprised you, let me know in the comments, and if you've ever stopped making resolutions, I'd like to hear what some traditions don't disappear, they just change shape, and some questions return every year, whether we answer them or not.